Better.
Good to hear.
All right. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our Fintech Fridays. And I think we're on number 3 of 2022. I've had awesome guests, but we're going to kind of take it in a little bit different direction here. And typically we'll talk to, tech vendors in the mortgage space and kind of dig deep there. But today we're going to be learning a little bit broader about kind of mortgage tech. So with me is Nima Wedlake from Tomvest Ventures. Nima, thanks for joining.
Great to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this will be something new for us, but I think it's awesome timing, right? We're fresh into 2022, and frankly, we're somewhat fresh into a new market, right? Or a new old market for mortgage bankers that have been around for a while. So, we've kind of, I think, officially made the turn into a predominantly purchase market. We've got, lenders having challenges, whether it's, margin compression or cost containment and all the things that you typically would see as we move into a smaller market environment. And I think it's probably never been more important for lenders of all sizes to really understand their tech stack and kind of how that equates to efficiency, customer experience, and frankly, from my seat, how it equates to business longevity, right? Because if you haven't focused yet on some aspect of a true digital experience for your consumers, it's going to get pretty tough for you down the road. So before we dive into that, because that's a kind of a weird opening, let's first figure out for the group, for the audience, who's Nima and who's Tomvest, and kind of where do you guys sit today in this mortgage tech world?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Nima Wedlake. I'm a partner at Tomvest Ventures. We're a San Francisco-based venture fund, and Tomvest has been around for over 20 years at this point. I would say over the last decade, we've been active in fintech. And this is sort of like a hindsight 2020 analysis, but if you look at our investment history over the last decade in fintech, you can sort of trace this interesting trend around the digitization of finance, starting with the sort of the easiest credit products to bring online, and then culminating in the most complex and challenging, and those being mortgage. So mortgage is a newer category for us. Our first investment mortgage was in 2018 in Blend. And then we've made a number of investments around the intersection of housing and finance. But, I would say at a high level, we have a thesis around the sort of digitization of all financial services. I think, like I mentioned, mortgage is the most complex and has taken the longest to sort of move online. But at the same time, like we're all as sort of a community around mortgage, realizing the benefits of technology, whether that's through creating more delightful customer experiences, extracting cost out of the manufacturing process, making sure we have better visibility into a portfolio of loans that have been originated. So like the benefits are sort of endless. I think now we're all just sort of getting our heads around how to harness it. Yeah. And that's been really interesting to observe as an investor.
And as I thought about when you and I connected a few weeks back and we were talking about coming on and doing this talk, the more I've thought about it as we got ready to today is from your seat as an investor and really starting to look at mortgage closer in the last 3 to 4 years. I think there's a lot that our audience, who are mostly independent mortgage bankers, can learn about how an investor in this space is looking at our space, right? And specifically looking at how tech can enable it. And you're looking at it from a lens with an expected return. And I would venture to guess that if investors like Tomvest are looking at this space and looking at some strategic investments, it would be wise for mortgage bankers to be thinking about the same thing in a different lens, right? And so maybe we can just talk a little bit about kind of how those kind of cross correlate.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, building building a mortgage company is difficult. I'm sure all your listeners sort of are acutely aware of that fact. I think building a mortgage technology company is quite difficult as well. You're sort of subject to the same cyclicality that is present in mortgage. You have to build technology for lots of different constituents within the value chain, including the borrower. And you're selling into an audience or a potential customer set of varying levels of sophistication from a tech implementation standpoint. And so, you know, when we first started looking at the category, obviously there's sort of the simplistic top-down view of mortgage, which is it's a massive industry within the U.S. You know, millions of mortgages originated annually, representing, you know, trillions now of origination volume that had until recently been in some ways untouched by technology. But the process of software eating mortgage is you know, it's been a long journey, and it's you know, I would say probably in the third or fourth inning still.
Right.
And so, what really got us sort of excited about the opportunity is when we saw Rocket Mortgage take off, sort of in the mid 2010s, as this really preeminent consumer brand within mortgage, and then conversely observing how existing originators responded to that rise, and specifically some of the larger banks.
Yeah.
And if you talk to the folks at Blend, that was a huge tailwind for them. That opened up conversations with banks that had literally never procured third-party software before.
Right.
And so I think that's been the paradigm shift that is taking place in a lot of industries, but I think happened in some ways due to the rise of direct to borrower platforms or brands like Rocket. And so, you know, Blend was founded 10 years ago, and they've been on that journey to sort of build software for the mortgage industry ever since. And, you know, we can go into different areas that I find interesting now, but I think in general, that shift from technology averse to this recognition that this is the future, and we need to be able to build these experiences and learn how to build them from, you know, Wells Fargo on down has been really interesting to observe.
Yeah, I've been. I think you and I downloaded on this a while back when we first met. I was in the mortgage industry, kind of direct primary production, if you will, for 28 years before, you know, making the leap and coming over to the startup fintech space. And so, you know, I remember kind of the first version of you know, high tech online lending, right? Mortgage.com was a brand back in the day. But I also knew, because they were a customer of mine, I bought loans from them. I knew how much sneakerware was behind the click, right? And the guys at Rocket Quicken were in that same space for a while. A lot of arms and legs behind the click, but they've come a long way to truly automate what can be automated without sacrificing, you know, consumer experience. And so I think, to your point, they definitely created the wave, and to a degree, we've got to give them credit. They've kind of set the bar of what should be expected of a mortgage experience now in this digital age. And so I don't really feel like it's as much as people are racing to catch up as it's people are moving to that true next phase of how do you engage a mortgage customer and what does that look like. And I think that digital experience is kind of table stakes today, no matter of your size at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think the other piece that we're spending some time studying right now is, particularly as we're shifting to your earlier point to more of a purchase oriented market in mortgage. Like what sort of that consumer interaction point looks like in a year, in 2 years, and 3 years. Like obviously at FinLocker, you're on the forefront of a component of that. But the other piece we're thinking about is like, can you create bundled experiences in real estate in a sort of compliant way that improve the consumer experience, whether that's Zillow offering mortgage or Open Door doing all that they're doing to sort of bundle multiple experiences into one transaction, or what Compass is attempting to do by integrating some financial products into its agent offerings. That's the piece we're thinking about right now as like the potential direction mortgage originations are headed. And then from an investor standpoint, we're thinking about, okay, what are the enabling technologies that can help that happen?
So, and I love the kind of poking around at the bundling, especially on a purchase transaction. You already know there's, at least 3 significant players in that transaction. You've got the traditional real estate side, which has multiple players, buy side, sell side, typically. Mortgage, we've already kind of hit that. And then you've got all the settlement and title and closing and the stuff that happens to facilitate that. And in a lot of cases, through decades, the consumer is asked to provide the same information to multiple players that ultimately is enabling the same transaction. So is your thought, how can we bring together these processes or these transactions so that the core or the source data can be used to fire multiple steps in the process? Is that one of the thought processes there?
Yeah, I think that's one of the critical pieces of enabling technology, right? So I think Plaid did a great job in exposing financial data that can be utilized by multiple parties. And then also just make the process of sharing that financial data between parties a little bit more seamless. I think we're on the precipice of a similar trend occurring within identity or other aspects of the final underwriting package, whether that's income verification, like we've chatted about before, asset verification, other forms of sort of identity verification. And Plaid is actually very much engaged in that effort to be sort of a single point of integration for extracting all consumer data that's relevant to an underwrite. But then there are also a number of other vendors that are powering that experience as well. Yeah. I think that's critical. And then the other piece is just the rise of I guess more tech-enabled platforms across the real estate value chain, like brokerage, for instance, that can be consumers of those sort of technology vendors, and then have product engineering teams in place to actually build this, integrated transaction experience, like Open Door has started to do.
Right.
Although they've come at it from a very specific angle with iBuying, I do think we'll see the rise of more bundled experiences, inclusive of brokerage.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Rocket's kind of been going there for a while with Rocket Homes and Rocket Mortgage. They already have, the whole title settlement kind of business in the umbrella. And so, and what's interesting is at the smallest lender level, I'm aware of at least a handful of, call it $500 million a year originators, so relatively small, who are thinking about the same thing. How do I bring in, these other experiences into my experience and not make this just about facilitating a mortgage transaction, but really facilitating kind of this experience around real estate, from buy to finance to insure, and all the supporting pieces of it. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I think the sort of like the Shopify analogy is a little bit overused at this point, but it's a good one, so I'll use it again. If you think about where Shopify has innovated, it's really been about building all of the blocks associated with running an e-com business into a simple product experience that you or I could understand and build upon. Like in a few hours, we could get a Shopify store up and running with, 0 lines of code,
right?
And we could, sort of manage every aspect of running that business from order taking to fulfillment to things like return management and post-sale customer engagement. It's all sort of within that unified product experience. And I think the same thing will begin to occur in mortgage, where if it's a small IMB, they can still provide this sort of harmonious and complete transaction experience for their clients. It's sort of the onus is on some of these technology vendors to enable them to do so.
Right.
And that's kind of an area of interest for us.
From your seat, when you think about, when you look at the landscape of mortgage tech or real estate and mortgage tech providers, vendors, if you will, I'm curious what your perspective is on the kind of the ability to work together across platforms where they make sense to work together versus not, right? Mm-hmm. That to me still feels like a pretty big impediment from really stitching together a clean consumer and lender experience across these multiple techs. I'm wondering if you see the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think there will always be some natural complexity around integrating multiple parties, just given the end size of parties involved in sort of the origination workflow. Some of the point of sale providers have done good work being sort of positioning themselves as an integration layer for other vendors. So I think we'll see continued progress there that'll make things easier. The LOSs have historically been a little bit more challenging to integrate with, and I think it's in some ways a byproduct of the era in which they were born,
right.
Where this sort of API first, integration first mentality was less prevalent then. And then I would say the third thing that's worth highlighting for your audience, there are some vendors that have emerged as like specifically middleware layers in mortgage, whose full job is to be an integration layer. And one good example of that is a company called Staircase that is working with many sort of small to mid-sized lenders. And they make the process of bringing on a new partner or a new tech vendor quite easy because they have a unified data model that can sort of read and write to all of those vendors relatively easily.
Right. Yeah, I learned about them late last year. It's such a needed resource, right? Especially for those mid to smaller IMBs. They're not sitting there with dozens or hundreds of resources in their own shop. They're reliant, for the most part, on their vendor partners and some other third parties. So that particular type of product is definitely needed. A couple more questions, and one in particular. Really, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. As we kind of look at 2022 and beyond in mortgage primarily, but I guess mortgage and real estate. Mm-hmm. If you were up on a stage in front of a bunch of IMBs, what would you be telling them that they should be thinking about as it relates to tech and kind of customer experience at this point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think these folks are probably inundated with vendors reaching out, sort of offering to like radically transform how they do business or improve across some metric. I think especially like given the phase that we're entering in mortgage, and the fact that it's sort of being immediately preceded by this this boom period in mortgage, where like the answer to responding to so much demand was to hire people and like throw bodies at the problem, and so as we transition to a different phase where we can't throw bodies at the problem, and the nature of demand for mortgage is changing. One of the things we talk a lot about internally is the role that technology companies play in any organization is shifting fixed costs to variable costs. So, how do you, like that's the beauty of AWS, right? Like it turned the need to hire a kind of a server administrator and buy servers into a pay-as-you-go experience, into a variable cost. And I think technology vendors that mortgage companies work with should make that same pitch. How do we help you change the cost profile of your business such that you can sustain through periods of massive demand and then sort of a nadir in demand as well. Because that's like the key goal, right? Like for if you want a multi-year technology vendor partnership, not just thinking about, just being reactionary and saying, hey, this is going to be a rough year in mortgage, so we need to cut costs.
Right.
To help us do so. I think fundamentally it's about shifting costs from fixed to variable, and using technology vendors to do so.
Pretty sure I know the answer to this question because you already sort of answered it at the beginning. But again, from your seat, which is unique, at least for folks that I'm talking to on this particular podcast, when you look at mortgage from your seat as a current investor and with holdings, as well as a prospective investor in this space, safe to say you're still bullish on the sector from an investment perspective?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it actually gets more interesting in this phase of the cycle, because we have to think a little bit more strategically about where to make technology investments. Like I said, when there's just like this rush of demand, in some ways, like there isn't the prescient need to adopt technology because folks will wait a few weeks to get their refi done. Right. And I think now is when the separation will occur between the good and the great IMBs, and I think technology is going to be a component of that. So we're actually really excited about this period. And I think if you want to be an investor in mortgage technology, or in some ways like fintech generally, you have to be able to stomach these sort of cycles, right. and I think we're fully prepared to do so.
Good to hear. Definitely good to hear. Well, Nima, this has been awesome. I appreciate your willingness to come on and kind of share your perspective. Super helpful. I think the audience, again, that kind of mid-size IMB should have the same perspective as you have from your investor seat, right? And you're sharing that perspective is super helpful, and hopefully folks learned a little bit more about kind of how an investor looks at our industry, our sector, and the tech that supports it. So thanks so much for coming on, and look forward to seeing you out on the kind of the mortgage conference circuit this year.
Yeah, likewise. And, we spend a lot of time in this space talking to a variety of technology companies. And so if any of folks in your audience ever want to reach out and have questions about what we're seeing, happy to do so. And they can email me at nima@tombest.com.
Awesome. And we'll share your LinkedIn profile and when we push this out on Friday morning. So thanks again for joining, and everyone, thanks for stopping by again on FinTech Fridays.
Thanks.
All right.